We've been gone for a while, but Freedom Friday is back, and today we are talking about parent rights. Stick with us. This is Freedom Friday, and you're still not free. Welcome, friends and family. We are back for another episode of Freedom Friday. It is Freedom Friday, and you are still not free, but hopefully you are freer after an hour with Stewart and El-Mekki and me. Sharif, brother, it has been a long time. Welcome back. How you doing?
It's been a long time since we left y'all. It's good to be back. It's good to be back.
Reunited, as you just said a minute ago. We should play Reunited. Listen, man, I'm excited to be back. Especially on Friday mornings. This used to be like a little bit of alchemy for me every week. We have our Sunday night show that we do with the 8 Black Hands, but Fridays were always the ones for us to be a little bit more cerebral about history, the history of education, the history of Black education, and have more like a class and class time. And because it's in the morning, it's not on a Sunday night, people aren't partying and doing the stuff that they do in our comment section that they usually do on the 8 Black Hands.
Right.
We draw a different crowd, people who are awake and have jobs and stuff. So
with some overlap, with some key overlap.
This is true. Some of those people that can party and can do the cerebral thing.
Listen, talk about intersectionality from a different angle. You know what I mean?
I love it, man. How's life been going for you? How's it, just the stress test, just in general, how are you holding up?
Yeah, you know what? It's stressful, but I think it's one of those things that you know is coming. Like my father texted me this morning, is like, hey, you know what, we would be derelict in our duty if we didn't remain vigilant. You know what I mean? Sometimes like he'll just give like a reminder and just like, I'm like, yeah, you know what, let me tighten up, let me check the steel on my spine and the steely gaze, because there's work and folks are, they're coming at us. That we'll jump into the show, with a lot of fervor, a lot of organization, a whole lot of bucks. And so, we just have to really, continue to fight, continue to, as you always say, we have a lot more resources at our disposal than our forefathers and foremothers. And so we have to get our head in the game, and get organized and strategic about how we do this and pull from what we learned, both the wins and the setbacks from the past.
Well, we have to believe that we have it much better than our ancestors. So if we are talking to them daily, if we are engaging with the thoughts and the ideas of our ancestors and them, like if we don't consider them gone or passed away, but we consider them still here and capable of dialogue with them, we have to be reminded every day by them, you've got more in your power to do more than we've ever had. Like you have more possibilities, more resources. So on your worst day, on your most stressed day, you've got a lot going for you. You got much better than your people in history ever had it. So I love that. What you just said. Now, what did your dad say to you? What was the quote again?
We would be derelict in our duty if we don't remain vigilant.
I love it
right now. Yeah.
So this is the type of things people say to you. We should put them on t-shirts, mental t-shirts. We should wear them every day. Yesterday, someone said in a breakout session that I was in, he said there's a Buddhist idea that observing reality the way that it is a moral act. And basically you have a moral obligation to see reality for what it is. I just thought, wow, that's deep. Like, the Buddhists sometimes will kick out stuff to you, and I'll be thinking, I don't know if I have time to think that one through.
Yeah. I mean, and just the moral obligation of it all, you know what I mean? Like not to be delusional, not to be hoodwinked and bamboozled, but I think it's also important to surround yourself with like-minded folks who can pull your coattail, redirect your gaze if you're distracted. That's why you can't do this stuff in isolation, right? Like, you can get yourself into a stupor and with nobody to tap you on the shoulder, like, yo, bruh, like the battle's over here,
Right. Well, I mean, in so many pieces of art and literature, there's a book called The War of Art, and the
Mm,
whole thing about the war of art in that book, it talks about the thing that is stopping you from producing your best writing and your best work is the thing that every writer faces, which is the devil of procrastination, the
mm,
devil of that gets in your way, that distracts you, and you don't just do the thing. So the easiest way
yeah.
to become a great writer is just to wake up every day and write something. And
Mm,
whether it's good or bad or trash or whatnot doesn't matter. Just do it, right? Just keep writing, writing, writing. But always know that the devil is going to tap you on the shoulder and be like, "Hey, how about something else?" Or "How about don't do this?" or whatever.
yeah.
In a book called Outwitting the Devil, that same concept is called drift. And in the
Mm,
Outwitting the devil is on trial. He's being prosecuted, and he admits that one of his key strategies for getting people to not do their God-given work is drift, to get them to
mm,
distract, get them to kind of just not see their purpose, and to do
yeah.
that, there's all kinds of candies that he puts in place around you
Mm.
to stop you from becoming educated. It's really a trip. Well,
Yeah,
anyways,
that
go
makes me
ahead,
feel
brother.
bad. I've been well, I was supposed to write a book a decade ago. People were like, "Oh, I mean, initially it was like my classmates. They were like, 'Yo, you're the very few Black Americans who grew up in Iran.' And I was in my 20s. I was like, I'm not writing a memoir in my 20s. You know what I mean? But then I'm like, that just seems like too weird for me.
Oh, stop
Then in
it.
my 40s, they were, folks again remind me like, hey, you know what? Like, remember you said, and now you're older now. And so I was like, yeah, but now it's going on 12 years since I made that commitment. I've been drifting, for over a decade now. But that's a good reminder, even just write a little bit, the small amount but consistent
Well, you have
can
no
probably
excuse
get you a
now.
lot of further. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
you're in
know. I
better
just,
position.
especially now that I just said it publicly too. That's bad. Like, public accountability is not always what I want. Or something like that. Some
Yes.
things, yes. Other things, like,
That is
yeah,
supposed to be one of the good strategies for getting something done is public accountability, putting it
yeah.
out there. So
Mm-hmm.
if you are a smoker and you want to quit smoking, don't do it in secret. Tell people up
Mm-hmm.
front that you want to stop.
Yeah.
And you'll have that cousin when they see you smoking and whatnot, who'll give you a hard time. Wait a
Mm-hmm.
second,
You
cuz I
said,
thought you said you was quitting smoking. Uh
yeah,
Anyways, well,
no doubt.
listen, let's move forward with some of the beginning of the show here. In the
Mm-hmm.
first part, let us talk about a freedom fighter. Let us
Yes.
highlight in a quick segment 64-year tenure in the classroom by a teacher who started teaching in 1959. Dr. Carter has been teaching at DeAnda, I'm sorry, elementary school since it opened in 2011 and has no plans to retire yet. God bless you, Dr. Carter, for working with these people's kids for all these years.
Yeah,
When
that's
asked what
amazing.
keeps her returning to the classroom, she said, "A feeling of security. I think I know what it takes to teach." Man, that is a great thing in terms of
Mm.
the confidence an educator can gain over time. Dr. Carter's commitment to teaching actually is unparalleled in her community, and she is being honored by the school district, by students, and by others locally, and getting some news reports. I don't know that I've found anybody anywhere who has taught for this long of a tenure. I think you had somebody that you know of that also had a pretty long tenure. But man, think about what it would take to come to the same place after 64 years and be able to retire and
Mm-hmm.
not do it.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, bro, the first moment that I can retire, I'm done.
But will you though? But will you though?
No, I won't.
Because it all does
No.
also depends on what we mean by retire. But this formalized, like, I don't think you'll ever formally, like, completely retire, because I think you'll at some point hand a baton off, and then you'll be coaching and mentoring.
That's right.
Um, but this is another level, right? This is still formal working, like, like, oh, I have an agenda, I have a schedule that I'm landlocked into.
Mhm, mhm.
Like, yeah, I mean, the person I was trying to find, I know, in Philadelphia last year or 2 years ago, they recognized her, and she was, because I think she was retiring after 60 years in the classroom. But this woman is 100 years old, man. Like,
Wow.
that's
Wow.
no,
That's
this woman isn't Johnny Carter 100.
that's a good question. I don't know if
I
she's
thought I,
100.
I
Let's see
thought I
here.
read
So,
somewhere that she was 100, but regardless, 60
yeah.
something years is
I
is
mean,
is absolutely amazing, man. It
it's
is.
amazing too that, like,
That's
all
two
that
careers fully.
that's almost 3. I
Yeah,
mean, like I mean, some people teach 20 years, 20,
yeah.
25
20.
years.
Yep.
And the interesting thing is all that she must have seen. She started teaching during years of segregation,
Mm-hmm.
and she has seen schools go from segregation to integration to disintegration to resegregation to right,
Disintegration. Yeah,
right. Like
yeah.
she has seen,
All
and
the
she has
Asians.
all the Asians, and she has remained a constant force in her community. The way that we lift up ancestors oftentimes is being, the ones who are like the tree that have the roots and have the
Mm-hmm.
branches that we can swing on, that we can like do our thing on. So God bless her, Johnny Carter, Dr. Johnny Carter, for her
Yeah.
long-term service, and now to lift up a school. We should be lifting up freedom fighting educators and freedom fighting schools. Meet a radically inclusive school called St. Louis Community Charter called City Garden Montessori in St. Louis. It's a community charter school. And this is something that I've been very interested in at EdPost, and we have been spending a lot of time thinking about, are what are the charter schools that actually within their charter, their work, the way that they execute their educational philosophy is really rooted in community, the communities where they are. They have a great degree of indigenous philosophy in the
Mm,
work that they do, meaning that they want to
right.
be at the grassroots. They're not looking to impart something into a community. They're actually looking to grow out of the community that they serve. Thus, the tag community charters. And by
Mm-hmm.
all accounts, we have community schools nationally that have a criteria for what makes a community school. These are charters that fit that criteria,
Yeah.
and thus they are better for the communities that they are in. City Garden Montessori in St. Louis is a community charter school with warmth and hospitality. It was founded in 1995 as an affordable private preschool, but it became a community charter in 2008 due to the lack of local schools that provided racially integrated, community based, and Montessori education. The school keeps its students close to home, and its neighborhood has been primarily low income but diverse. City Garden is deeply committed to anti bias, anti racist, which is called AMBAR or ABAR, which I've never heard this before,
Mm,
anti bias and anti racist. And this is within their coherent educational philosophy of how they educate kids, which informs its thoughtful approach to expansion. The school has grown to serve more than 500 students and has launched a training institute to equip more teachers with its unique mix of Montessori and ABAR education. City Garden has committed to opening 3 new schools in other St. Louis neighborhoods. This is, to me, a really good example of the opposite of what we hear about in education right now, which is so
yeah.
divisive, so hostile, so angry. Even within school reform and the school choice movement and in some of the charter movement, it's about regressing and going the other way. Some of
Mm,
the love of kind of like classical Western oriented education in charter world and others is not really something that's growing out of communities. Communities aren't calling for that. They're not asking for it. So I love this type of school. What do you think, Sharif, about community charters and this
yeah.
brand of Montessori?
Yeah, look, I loved it. Reading this, and thanks for for sharing it and uplifting it on Ed Post. And of course I couldn't help but to have kind of whimsical, forlorn visions of Nitham Musasa, if that could have been turned into a charter, before it shut down, and
Hmm.
expanded, to more schools and what that could have looked like, because it sounded very similar, starting as a private school, starting to, to give children a better education, alternative, empowering education. And I think, so many of the Montessori strategies are far more consistent with how children learn, how they learn in community, how they learn at home, and a natural, like a natural way of progressing,
Hmm. Hmm.
thinking and where SEL isn't this separate class, it is part of the ecosystem and the ethos, and everyone's displaying emotional development. social skills, empathy, all the things that people now like, that's a bad thing. Like, don't
Mhm.
teach my kid empathy. I'll do that. Like, clearly you ain't. Clearly. But
If you
yeah,
think you're doing that, you're failing.
yeah, exactly. Miserably, miserably. Talk about below basic, you know what I mean? But yeah, I love, schools like that, and we need far more, like, so there we need so many people to shut up and start a school if they know so much, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, just stop talking, like get to work. The aggrieved have grievances,
Yeah.
especially our children. So I love that school. I love um, the concept, the idea, and the why, the rationale behind it.
I should say a school like this could be in trouble in that, we have so many
Mhm,
people who speak a good game about school choice. School like this in some of the states that are passing anti-Black education censorship laws are in some of the most school choicey states like
mhm,
Florida and
mhm,
Oklahoma, places like Texas and Iowa. At the same time that they're talking about increasing access for parents to schools, they are also passing laws that would make it hard for this particular school to keep using its anti-bias, anti-racist orientation within its schools. So
that's a
that
bar
is
right
like,
there.
I mean, that's the conundrum of
Yeah.
where school choice as is right now as a movement. It's not learner choice. It's the
Mhm,
choice of a school, but it's not the choice of what you learn.
yeah.
And that's the problem. So we have to rethink and rebrand school choice because we don't care if you have a choice of school if you can't learn what you want to learn when you get there. And this is a school that is organically grown out of its community, that is teaching in a way that fits its community, and it
Mhm,
could be outlawed by some state, some state group that doesn't want their kid to be uncomfortable.
yeah. Which means taught, right? Like taught.
Yeah,
That's
right.
that's what it means. I mean, every
Yeah,
level of growth takes a level of discomfort.
yeah.
So the fact that they're focused so much on, you know, um, the entire world continuing to be situated in this white supremacist ideology, is, I mean, if I was like just an alien just looking at it neutral, I'm like, what a fascinating group of idiots. Like, you know what I mean? Like
Right.
like literally
Yeah.
watching how they do this. And it also reminds me of what my mother used to say, like, freedom. Everybody has a different definition of freedom.
Hmm.
Some folks want the freedom to be racist. Some people want freedom from racism.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
like those are two different orientations of how you approach the same thing. So when we're talking about school choice, we may be talking about freedom to and freedom from certain things. And when they talk about school choice, they're talking very differently about what they want the freedom to do
Yeah, I
and the
think,
type of education they want freedom from.
and we're going to get, to that in this segment around
Hmm.
parents' rights,
Hmm.
like which parents do we talk about? On the way there, I would say this, there are special populations in the United States. There's a reason why American Indians or Native Americans have reservations. Not everybody has reservations, and you have to ask yourself, well, why are we treating this group special? Why do they get reservations? Why do they get land? Because there were historic reasons for affording them reservations and land, and it wasn't all good, as a matter of fact, and it isn't like they came out the victors with getting
Yeah,
that.
because
But
that
when
ain't
you
even the land they would have chosen
it's
if
not
they
the land they
had
would
the
have chosen.
choice. Hmm.
Absolutely. And it wasn't where they would have chosen. They were marched somewhere and said, hey,
Exactly.
this is where you're going to live now. This is for you. But it only goes to show that there are different populations in the United States that have unique claims in history for what it is that they have in terms of their deals. And what is happening to Black people is there's an attempt to strip us of every unique claim that we have to be afforded our reservations, our ability to own something that makes up for history, makes up for the many years in which the United States actually used a population and stripped them of all of their rights in a pretty brutal and spectacular fashion. And then, once emancipated, said, "You're free now. Let's just start from scratch. Let's just from today forward, let's be equal with no special provisions, no justice, no making up for history." And let's wait until what we think are the statute of limitations in terms of you making a claim. And then we'll say, why haven't you guys made it yet? Why haven't you guys caught up yet? Well, one of the things in education that I think is a special provision is we should be protected from any education censorship law that is outlawing entire bodies of Black authorship, Black scholarship, Black history,
Yeah.
Black ideology. Whatever
Leave
law
us
you
the hell
pass,
alone.
we should have a education version of reservations,
Yeah.
some special provision, because Florida should not be able to say, because white people are uncomfortable with reading about Ruby Bridges, you don't get to read about Ruby Bridges.
Mhm. Yeah. No, absolutely. The whole idea of educational sovereignty, I think, is absolutely critical. This is some of like what, and again, pulling back from history, this is a lot of like what folks talked about with us, warned us about, whether it was, Malcolm telling New York City, like, give up 30% of the schools and give them
Mm-hmm.
educational sovereignty for the communities that, that will take control over, what these schools do, what they teach, how they teach, all those kind of things. This is what the Republic of New Africa, RNA, other, RNA said something very similar, like, hey, here's our land, here's where we're most populated, here's where we suffered the most, and so this is where, we want to live, prosper, build schools, raise our children and families, and set forth a vision. And so I love the idea of, hands off, like 100% educational sovereignty. It could be one small step, but huge step in the path towards reparations. And I think reparations, we have to start with educational reparations.
And paying the educational debt.
Yeah.
You can't just prevent people from getting the educational capital that they need, which is literacy, the ability to read, write, understand the world. You can't just deny them that for years and years and years and underdevelop them, and then not consider that there's an educational debt that needs to be repaid. And what you just said is one small start on providing that debt, which is one, to say, let's just put in stone, we have a unique historic claim to being able to maintain educational sovereignty, regardless of whatever happens with education for everybody else.
Yeah.
Education sovereignty for us, cognitive sovereignty for us, and the rebuilding of our educational capital so that we can be educationally self-sufficient.
Yeah.
Meaning
Exactly.
we need to own some schools, and we need to decide how those schools run and what is taught in those schools. We can't do it if our friends in the school choice community are outlawing our ability to have cognitive sovereignty, meaning to teach what we want to teach our kids about our worldview of how we think the world should be taught, how things should be taught. Well, let's jump into our topic here this week, which is the Parents' Bill of Rights. So House Republicans have gone on a I won't call it a warpath, but they want us to remember that that parents are important. And this is becoming a new tool of the GOP to leverage some claim on education, because for years, Democrats have been the most trusted political party when it comes to education. And some of those fortunes are starting to change with the Republicans taking on culture war issues. We should talk real quickly about the fact that there's a history of using parents' rights as a tool for elevating conservative bigotry. Conservatives in the 1950s to the 1970s used parental rights and family autonomy arguments to preserve segregation, while parents of color felt that their rights were being ignored. Later, Anita Bryant used similar rhetoric to roll back civil rights ordinances for gays and lesbians and the anti-abortion movement, and proposed laws requiring parental notification or consent. And in the 80s, 90s, conservative Christians demanded a parental rights amendment. And even back then, the Reagan administration required notification for federally funded birth control clinics, as a matter of fact, and sex ed, other things like that. In the 90s, the Christian Coalition promoted bills protecting parental rights to direct. I could go on and on. So, there's been a slow march of using parental rights every decade as the tool to beat back social progress and racial progress. The current GOP Bill of Rights, titled very specifically on brand, the Parents' Bill of Rights, emphasizes parental rights in the classroom. It passed largely along along partisan
Partisan,
lines.
yeah.
Yeah. And the bill includes language that says that schools and government officials should not seek to use law enforcement to criminalize those parents that are attacking school boards. They should also have to um, notify parents about every piece of curriculum and every book that is in their library, and definitely should not participate in helping children change their gender pronouns. I could go on and on, but what you really get out of it at the end of the day, you come up with really stupid examples like the Statue of David in one school in Florida being, being complained about by parents. It was a classical charter school that was talking about one of the most famous pieces of sculpture in history, and parents complained about it because David is nude. And I could go on with about 18 of those examples. I
Well,
won't go over them. We have lots of these examples of the dumbest things happening downstream because of this new GOP focus on a narrow set of parents and a narrow set of parents' rights. I'm going to stop here, but I will say it's not without some pushback. The National Parents Union has actually really pushed.
NPU.
Yeah, NPU has really pushed for other parents, for all the rest of us to be heard too, because the GOP parents are really the white parents in suburbs who are middle class, who don't want their kids learning that there's such thing as gay people and black people. That leaves out a whole bunch of other parents in the so-called march towards parents' rights. And I'm happy to say my friend Carrie at the Parents Union has led a mighty effort, took it all the way to the Capitol in a week or so ago, demanded that the rest of the parents be heard. They even had an opportunity to engage with Moms for Liberty while they were there, and to have black and brown parents actually say, "We are here. We are meant to be heard too, and we want to be heard." And to that end, the Democrats actually introduced a bill that is more, in keeping with parents actually want. The Parents Union has a poll that says that parents want high quality and well-rounded education, and 90% of the parents believe that should be guaranteed by law. 36% of parents trust Democrats, which is more than the percentage of parents that support Republicans when it comes to a Bill of Rights. The stuff that their polling shows is that parents are way more interested in things like empathy and kindness being taught, like to 85%, than the Republicans are. They're way more interested in focus on curriculum in terms of what works to teach kids to read versus this stuff around gender and race and the stuff that the GOP is pushing. So what say you from a Black perspective? If we're talking about Black parents, how do you think we should be experiencing this debate?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes, pretty consistent along the lines of, NPU. I think, anytime you have like, Moms for Racism, I know they call themselves Liberty, but it's really just the liberty to be racist. When they show up, they are not talking about our children, our parents, our desires. They've never centered that, so it's no reason to think that in 2023, that's what they're centering. And it's the same strain of parents who, look, they were mad at Arnie Duncan when he called them out about the Common Core, right? It's the same strain of folks who, they show up loud, abrasive, but well funded, organized, showing up at school board meetings, yelling at everybody, threatening at everybody. But they've never, they don't even want. The thing about it is, for Black children, Black students, they don't even want assimilation. They want subjugation. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like they're not even saying like, hey, here's the common thing that everybody wear and it's inclusive. That's not what they want. They're like, get down or lay down. Like, that's pretty much how they approach this. And so as a Black parent, the things, this whole idea of the book banning and, doubling down on the idea that we're not going to teach truth. We're going to erase all the things that that really point to like the complicated and racist history of the United States. So as a parent, I teach an accurate history, being critical thinkers about the past, the present, as well as what the future could possibly look like. And so I, just shout out to Kerry Rodriguez, and the team, from all over the country, who are continuing to, organize. So which is what we talk about all the time, right? Like
Hmm.
organizing, elevating the voices, combining and coalescing around particular issues. And so to see them consistently doing this, I think is absolutely critical. And just shout out to all the organizing bodies for families, for Black and Brown families, as well as our white allies who are, on the right side of justice, on the right side of history, because this once again is showing that there's a consistent strain as you went through the decades of them trying to really police, erase, and undermine, and totally ignoring the idea of literacy, safety. The amount of reports that's talking about students with mental health issues, the massive educator shortages, and those adjacent to the classroom, right? Bus drivers and cafeteria support and paraprofessionals. These massive shortages. Yeah, you're talking about Ruby Bridges is a danger to democracy. Like that's fanatical, ludicrous behavior. Like
Absolutely.
seriously.
People
And
have,
they're unhinged, man. They're like completely unhinged, but unhinged with power. Like
right.
almost cartoonish, right? You look at it, it's kind of like Pinky in the Brain, like just a dumb
Not
Wile E.
Pinky in the
Coyote.
Brain.
Yeah, like I mean, it's just like the dumbest ideas, but yet they
Yeah.
got the power to get in front of Congress and pass some nonsense.
Well, not just Congress. I mean, they're state houses. So the
Yeah,
way
yeah.
that
That's where it starts, right?
it
Yeah.
starts there. I mean, and if you
School
think
boards and
about
state
things
houses.
like the temperance movement of years ago, if you think about the Daughters of the Confederacy, if you think
Mm,
about the way that white women have showed up in racial politics throughout the years, they have been the handmaiden and the nurturer of white supremacy in many of the past historic movements. Now, you can call me out for saying this and saying it forthrightly as I am. I will tell you that you will lose that argument because empirically it's just historic fact. It's documented, right? The way in which white women in groups were used to create social power,
mm,
as the nurturers of the movement, and the mothers, the maternal influence of white children, to be used and weaponized politically for things like the White Citizens Council years ago that wanted to make sure that schools did not integrate. And
mm.
the way that they would do it is that they would say that white kids are going to be mixing with black kids, and suddenly white girls are going to be dating black boys. And white Christian organizations, white mother organizations, and others passed around all kinds of things that today would qualify as what you see when you look at libs for TikTok, or what you see, white moms passing around books like Gender Queer or whatnot, to be jarring and to scare people of what's coming down. There's a history to that. That's not a new strategy. That's not brand new. That happened 20 years ago and 40 years ago and 60 years ago. And it was always the same kind of play. Use white women as the sympathetic characters who are just really concerned about protecting their babies, for really kind of um, just misanthropic type of
Mm.
ends. People have been asking me a lot about, well, Chris, it looks like you've had a voice change. You're real supportive of some union stuff or whatnot. You're supportive of unions, and you're saying good things about Randy and others. I've always believed, and I've always said, first of all, my affiliation with school choice, parents' rights, I've always been for those things, but it has always been anti-racist. I don't know how anyone has known me for all these years and has looked at what I've been writing about for 20 plus years, 25 years plus, about education, and not see that it was always anti-racist. School choice for an anti-racist purpose, to build up kind of a black community that can educate itself out of the oppression that we live in, right? Parents' rights. Which parents? Black parents, to have rights, to be able to choose a school and choose what their kids learn and take over the educational process. All of it was always anti-racist. So if my movement starts becoming racist, and there is no force, to slow down, we don't have all the power to go to governors. How many black governors are there that we could go to and say, hey, black governor, we want you to defend our rights the same way that white governors are defending the rights of white moms? We don't have
Mm,
any. How
mm,
many senators do we have that we can go to and say, hey, black senator, we want you to defend our parents' rights the way that the white senators are defending white parent rights?
mm.
We don't really have them, right? So where's our power? If we don't have Black governors and senators who we can just form in little social groups and take to them the most outrageous, silly claims and have them
Right.
make it law, like
Mm.
they make it law, like they don't just, we're not having an argument. This
Yeah,
isn't an
it's not an
argument.
argument. It's not.
No, it's not an
Yeah,
argument.
yeah,
It's not
yeah.
an argument. They're ending the argument by saying, we shall pass a law that says, thou shalt not teach Black things. Thou shalt not listen to the Black perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And we have no pushback on that, except for we do have allies. And when we think about allies, I can't think of a more formidable ally in this than someone who represents the 3 million educators in the United States and the teachers. If Randy Weingarten is, when Malcolm says, I'm for truth, no matter who says
Who
it, I'm
says
for
it?
justice, no matter who's against it. If Randy Weingarten is going to be the person who's going to walk up and cut us down for the tree, from the tree as others are trying to string us up on the tree, then Randy Weingarten is an ally. And the people stringing us up on the tree are not an ally. And the friends who are standing in the crowd watching us being strung up saying, yeah, I just really disagree with them being strung up, but not saying anything publicly and not organizing and not checking and challenging their friends who they're having cocktail parties with, they are not allies either. Right? Black education is being strung up on a tree. Black children, the intellect, the Black intellect is being strung up on a tree. It's being mischaracterized. It's being marginalized out of law, and it's being removed from books and from libraries and from the offerings that kids can have, not just their kids, ours also. That is the educational equivalent of a lynching. It's an intellectual lynching. And if Randy Weingarten is going to show up and say, hey, I will use my power and my social and political capital to call that out and to be against it, guess what? I'm union as hell. I'm union as hell.
Listen. I mean, and all while they're doing it, while they're stringing, Black education, Black students up, they're literally saying like, hey, that person cutting you down that's your real enemy, not me.
Right.
Like, what I mean? Like they're actually, signaling and trying to, use that as as a lever against advancement. And so yeah, 100% agree. I think there's so many things that we do agree on. Like we can't let when we're talking about like expanding the tent and all these things, and you know and they even say like, oh, across the aisle and bipartisan. Well, this is our form of bipartisanship. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
This is our form of it, and 100%, and they're organized. I would believe that most of them, will agree that this is absolutely crazy, what's happening, and there has to be a form of resistance, and they are a part of the resistance. And so yeah, I'm glad, and folks who don't understand is because they don't want to understand. It's not that complicated. There, people are trying to erase us. Randy and others are saying like that's not okay. All right, talking about convergence of interest. Like, man, this is about as compelling as it gets. So yeah, shout out to you, and let's
And
keep finding others. Yeah.
if we had to ask the question, who's really with us on this, we could probably find a lot of people. But if we had to ask who has any power, because at the end of the day, this whole struggle that we're in for curricular freedom, for learner freedom, for the right to actually educate Black children in the way that we want our children educated, we have to ask ourselves who has the power to be able to help us maintain our rights, our right to what you called earlier educational sovereignty. Who has the power to do that? And to be very honest with you, many of our national leading Black organizations have resources, but not the power, right? Labor unions, if they are going to be the ones that are going to step out there, there's one thing I can say for sure that everybody agrees on is that they have power. They have some power to push stuff, right? Now, I think what people on the right are going to say is, hey, listen, the more they push all that racial stuff, the better it is for us because we think that white people are not kind of going to fall in line with it. My question would be, then why do you think that would be? Why do you think specifically white people are not going to be down with the unions pushing anything around racial justice, racial progress? Could it be that those people have some form of bias that would prevent them? that you were counting on, as a matter of fact. The right is counting on the
That's the
bias.
word. That's the word. Like, you know what I mean? There's some things that are as you know what they call American as apple pie and baseball. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Hmm.
And that is, that's another one. Apple pie, baseball, and racism.
And racism.
That's the stuff. You know what I mean? That they can count on that, which I think is very important that you pointed out. It's not just that it's they're part of the strategy. They know at the end of the day, they're like, yo, we the hoods are in the trunk,
Hmm.
you know, and we know they still got access to them, and the hood and the mindset. So yeah.
Do you think that I'm sure you're going to agree with me somewhat on this, that there is a thing for us to do that we're not doing right now, which is not depend solely on schools to teach everything, though. Like right now, in the idea around Highlander type camps,
Mhm,
where we are teaching young people to be actively involved, not just in politics, but in education politics,
mhm.
like where we start training young people, maybe it's at HBCUs, whatever, in camps around how to fight for educational sovereignty, for instance.
Yeah. Listen, I love that. I think multiple strategies have to be happening, right? Like we have to be vocal, we have to get access to power, we have to organize, we have to build our, this group or this coalition, and we have to own out of school time. Like,
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
me, that is such a critical, even when you think about it, right? Like, what is it? Like 20% of a kid's day is actually in school. And that's incredibly important, profound, impactful time. It's still 20%.
Hmm. Hmm.
That other time, man, if we're not doubling down on the tools, the armor, the shields, the knowledge, all the things that they need to navigate and be healthy, right? Like, for protection, self-preservation, understanding of where they're situated and why, how we all got here, and where should we be charting a course forward. I just, I am so passionate about us having those, because again, talking about educational sovereignty and independence and autonomy, like, you know, that's that's a significant part. And we don't just see, school time either, right? Like, so
Hmm.
it's a both and. But I think that is a space that we can rally extra support for folks who are adjacent to schools in communities, resources, everything, from reconstruction to, you can have Montessori after schools, right? Like it's like so many different ways. And I think this is also, I shared this again, when my mother was really pushing back on our Masjid Mujahideen back in the day, because they said this, she was like, this shouldn't just be for adults. How are you protecting the intellectual development of children? And so her and other parents demanded and started a pre-K. Saying like, you should not have a masjid that doesn't have some taken on some kind of public accountability or responsibility to work with children too, right?
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
like that was my earliest school, was in Masjid Mujahideen with Mama Shakur, Sister Ambra, Brother Lukman, as our general music and science teachers, right? And so again, that was, those kind of things can be done. Every faith-based institution, every HBCU, every civil rights, human rights organization, all of these folks really should be banding together and mapping out, okay, who's taking care of what, for our children.
Yeah, I think we got to get out of Black folks having a begging movement
Yeah,
and
and
just
reliance on
just
institutions that we know. Like, I mean, just
yeah.
when you talk about the power and the connection, like they have power over your school. They have power at the state level, at the school board level. And if you're not aligned, if they're removed from your interests, then it's going to be against your interests.
Hmm.
There's
Hmm.
it rarely is it going to be neutral. Rarely is it going to be neutral. It's usually going to tilt in the favor of those who have power.
And listen, they could be great people, but it would still be in their best interest to do exactly what you just said. Like it's in their best interest. So you have to like always think to yourself, like, what's in their interest?
Mm-hmm.
If you're letting them control your thing, what's in their interest? It's in their interest to make you stupid.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I mean,
I
anyways,
mean, look, even the North in fighting the South, it was still in their interest, right? Because
absolutely.
they're like Southern states have too much power with all, your enslavement, you're counting them 3/4,
Hmm.
all of it. It was still in their interest, right? Because they're like, yo, we want to take away some of your power.
We
For
want your
most of them, it
cotton.
wasn't. Yeah,
We want
it
your
wasn't
cotton.
exactly. You're not going to deny us that.
Yeah.
You're not going to deny us that.
Uh-huh.
And
We got to
we
wear
need that.
clothes.
Yeah, we need that sugar for our rum up here too. It's cold up here. We drink. It's cold, right? And so, like, you know what I
That's
mean? Like, not
hilarious.
understanding that. Like, so yeah, we're ally. Like, fight with them. We join in the army, but we also have to be clear, open
Yeah.
eyed, clear eyed, and understanding. Like, it ain't all benevolence and just like altruistic. Like, oh yeah, I am this higher order thinking, and I'm so godlike that this is, for some, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But there were.
This cuts both ways from the right to the left, the conservative and the liberal on the white side of the fence, in that they both should see interest in Black people being self-sufficient. Right. There's a degree on the right about us needing to be more self-sufficient and self-determining and pull ourselves up from our bootstraps and all that stuff. We've talked about that here. And there's a way in which, on the left, they're saying that the policies and the things that they promote are actually to make us more successful
Mm,
and self-sufficient and more enfranchised in the United
mhm,
States. So the idea that we would have cognitive sovereignty, educational sovereignty, we would get to decide for ourselves what our schools do and how we're educating our children, and that we wouldn't just have the right to do it, that we would have the responsibility to do it, is something that should play well for everybody. That should play well
yeah,
for everybody. Like, the
mm,
idea that we should have this as a set of rights and responsibilities, there should be nobody who should say, "Well, I don't think that that's good." Like, like
mhm,
that should be good, for everyone. And that starts with what you said. Our HBCUs should be running schools, and they should be running lab schools. The HBCUs put out the greatest percentage of Black professionals in almost every area, so they should be putting out our teachers, the majority of our
mm,
teachers. And those teachers should be trained in a pedagogy of what works for Black children in the Black lab schools, so that we can create more schools like that, so that we can teach more Black children in a way that's effective and works for them.
mhm,
So something like the work that you do, building the pipeline of the teachers, the more of the process that we own, the more of it we're responsible for, and we're responsible for the outcomes. The system should feel a great relief. Like, at least they're not going to get blamed if we're running big parts of the system. We'll be the ones that get blamed. To that end, though, about what you can do on the grassroots level, I'm really enamored with Oakland Reach. The Oakland Reach is a parent group for people that don't
yes.
know it. There's a parent group in Oakland. Many of us know it, but if you don't, the Oakland Reach has this liberator model that they took to solving some of the pandemic problems and learning loss. And they didn't just sit on their hands and wait for other people to come and save them. They thought, what can we do with what we have in our community to be the ones who lead, the ones who actually lead on the solutions? And in their model, it says here, the Liberator model is a solution that upskills parents and caregivers to be paid tutors, and at the same time provides high dosage tutoring in some of the lowest performing schools in our district. The Liberator model is unique because it integrates both academic aspirations and socioeconomic needs. So they weren't just thinking around, how do we get Black kids passing tests? They were thinking around, how do we uplift the whole community at once? How does everybody play a role? How do parents become tutors? How do they become the chief educator or the chief education leader in their children's lives, but not just their own kids, everybody's? How do we have
Mhm,
a village
mhm,
model? And how do we start having more ownership of the means of education? In another philosophy, people talk about the means of the economy and economics, but this is really about the talent pipeline, the where do the workers come from in the education system? Who's And their model is saying we should be growing our own. Our people should be becoming the ones that educate us. This liberator model has been one that has been used in other countries by indigenous people. So for people indigenous to Oakland, congratulations, hats off. You have something, I think, that is really special, that nationally we should be thinking more about how we have more of this.
Hmm. And some of those parents, they're helping to become teachers, right? So again, increasing the pipeline and using these skills of practicing and tutoring, understanding the science of reading. But yeah, as you always say, like CEO of our children's education, like to me, that's just just fantastic. Shout out to Miss Young and and her team and the work that they're doing. Like we need far more of that. You shared the story of Cuba, right? Like very similarly, um, how they decided like, hey, we're going to be a literate nation, and it takes uh, all of us, and this is how here's how we're going to march forward. Like it's that kind of commitment. Like we just need that. And when you speak about everybody should want this, everyone should want the fact that people are talking about like being an economic engine, like Pennsylvania, for example. Oh, we want to be an economic engine. Yeah, we're going to cut $1 billion out of the school budget. So then, how are you going to become an economic engine? Then? You know what I mean? Like if you're building and funding prisons at the rate you are, and you're underfunding schools at the rate you are, how do you expect it to prosper as a state? And even even though you're setting up these prisons in your little hick towns to hold up their economy, they're still not going to be prosperous because that is not the that's not a growth strategy for your economic engine when you really think about it. Like you're literally undermining and cutting. Even those folks that you're hiring to be those guards, even they're not means you're not investing in their schools either because that's not pushing them to be critical thinkers and contributors to society. And you can't do that if you're undermining what the educational system is. So everybody should want it, but they don't. Like they say one thing, and I think that most of them, like they just don't care. Because I think you get to a level where you're so drunk with power, you can't see what strategy is. All you can see is amassing more power and making sure that no one is infringing on your moat. You got a moat around this thing, and you're like, I'm keeping everybody else away from it. And shout out to all groups who are organizing and not just doing the sad singing and hand wringing, like understanding that even during sad times, critical thought, critical work has to continue. And so just anytime someone is just like up and at 'em, like Oakland Reach and NPU and many others, like we just need more and more and more. Because at the end of the day, what you see that is an example of taking back some power, using autonomy, educational sovereignty, all the things that we've been talking about. That's a clear, crisp example of it.
When I think about this issue that we're talking about parents' rights, you have heard me say this before and talk about parents' responsibilities. I said it a little bit in this one. I actually do think that we need to shift from rights to responsibilities because I think there's a different level of what we think it requires of us. Rights feel very much like an entitlement. Responsibilities very much feels like a job. And I think if we shift the focus, help me understand how I shift to that focus without that sounding like it's the bootstrappy right-wing stuff when really it's more of the you can't build a revolution on irresponsibility. Right.
Facts.
Right.
Yeah.
How do I not sound like when I'm saying, listen, we have a responsibility to do X, fill in the blank with all the things that we should be doing for our kids and to create the world that we want without it coming across as sounding like the right-wingy type of lecturing about you people ought to be doing more, whatnot. I don't think I have found that way to describe what I think is a necessary shift from thinking about our rights to our responsibilities as parents and as people for our own liberation.
Yeah. No, yeah. Usually when I hear someone speaking about it where it has a kind of the finger wagging type of thing, lecturing, it's when they're doing that, but they're not willing to hold the system accountable at an even higher degree. It's usually just facing, it's just like, just the market calls for like whatever, and you all should be doing X, Y, Z. We're not going to address the system. You just need to figure out how to navigate it, right? Like, so to me, when I hear that, it's usually just one facing. Where if it's a society, and I actually am okay with the idea of rights, but I agree with you. It should be rights and responsibilities, because I think we all have rights on one another, and that's what makes community. Like, and we may not term it that way, but when you break it down to the, to the what we used to say, break it down to the very last compound, it's about rights and responsibilities that we're
That's not
agreeing
true.
to.
Who says break it down to the last compound?
That's KRS-One,
Is
bro.
it?
Yeah, break it down to the very last
I like
compound. See
that.
how it sounds, you
Yeah.
know.
I
But
I
yeah,
don't know. I've heard it before. Well, let me
yeah,
ask you
you
about that
heard
though.
that. You heard that.
Quickly, you just said so I 100% agree that we always have to focus on our rights. Um, and I also agree that we always have to. This is where you just helped me out, because it is different than the right wing thing. The right wing thing talks about our responsibilities as a way to get out of talking about the systemic things that are
Hmm.
preventing us from doing our responsibilities, right?
As they're tightening those systemic issues,
Absolutely.
right? They're
Yeah.
strengthening that
Yeah.
while they're saying, "Yo, get better," and the backhand is like tightening the knot. You
They're
know what I mean?
slapping
Like
you.
that's
Yeah.
yeah.
But okay, that's super helpful. Um, and I will say this. I think responsibility always has to be our primary focus, because it exists whether we have the rights or not.
Hmm.
So there are
Hmm.
times where our rights have been taken from us and stripped from us, and our responsibility only grew during those times to fight for ourselves.
Yeah, it definitely
So
grows.
our
Definitely.
responsibility to fight, our responsibility to do everything we can for our own freedom, to do everything that we possibly can for our children, to do everything we can for our future, like to be thuggish and ruthless about doing everything we possibly can for ourselves, our kids, our future, our race, to correct history. We have a responsibility to do that whether we have the rights or not. And we always knew that when our rights were being taken from us, but the more rights we got, the more sleepy we could get about our responsibility to
Mm-hmm.
keep fighting, right? So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you could be paid off with a few rights here and there that make you start neglecting your responsibility to seeing things. What I said about the Buddhists earlier,
Mm-hmm.
seeing reality for what it is a moral act.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, you have less obligation to see reality for what it is when you start getting paid off by a few rights here and there,
Yeah.
a few
Yeah.
things. Like, we have the right to be seen on the Grammys now. We don't have the right to own record companies. We
Mm-hmm.
have the right,
Mm-hmm.
um, uh, so I don't know if I'm getting there yet. I'm
No.
eventually going to
Yeah.
get there. I'm going
Yeah.
to keep driving towards this, because there is something to be said for our responsibility as a people for our own revolution, and our own liberation. And at the same time, part of that responsibility is studying the system for what it is
Mm-hmm.
and knowing where it is abridging our rights.
Yeah. No, I agree. I can't really argue with that. I think I do agree that the responsibility piece is central to all of this, and it expands and grows, as things, just as we get older, our responsibility grows. There are contexts and situations
Mhm,
where we
mhm,
have to amass and take on more responsibility. I think I look at the rights, and it's probably, it might just be from, Islamic perspective that I grew up in, this idea that responsibilities, yes, absolutely 100%. And that's where, the whole idea of like, self-control, self-discipline, like you have a responsibility over that. And I think it was also merged with the idea that there are others who have rights over you in certain
mhm,
ways, like in a community. Like my child has rights over me.
mm,
They might
mm,
not have a responsibility to me depending on their age and growth and development, but they still have rights over me. Like they have
mhm,
we believe like they have a right at the basic level to have, a good name.
mhm, mhm,
Like
mhm,
even that is like their first right as a newborn. No, they have
mhm,
no responsibility whatsoever, but they have rights over us.
mhm.
Is how we're taught. So it's probably just a lot of just a Islamic ideology that where I'm thinking about the rights and responsibilities and how they merge together, and they're like really intertwined pretty deeply. Um, from that vantage point. But
Mm,
yeah, no, I mean, I
yeah.
can't argue, about this idea of responsibility and taking on more, and the actually, and the more you have, even those Spidey says it. That's a age-old concept of, you know, the more power you have, your responsibility actually grows as well. So yeah.
I love it. And that's a good place for us to end for the week. That is a beautiful sentiment. My kids definitely exercise their right over me constantly.
Right.
So I can't argue with you there. They are with
They
you on
do.
that
They
one.
have
So,
they
and you know, my final
yeah.
word on all this is just basically to say, as parents, we should be vigilant. We should be hyper vigilant about our kids. I love where we ended with rights and responsibilities. And we will, on Freedom Friday, I think, keep pushing these issues that drive us closer towards understanding what we can do for our own educational salvation. And I love what we came up with today. We need a right to educational sovereignty. We need to re-own the means of our own education. We have a unique historic right for us to have educational reservations and to have an educational debt repaid. These are all big concepts, but somebody should link them all together, and we should put them into an agenda, and we should start actually getting it out to the people. We should make it plain for our people. And then we will have a responsibility to fight for our rights in the face of a movement that right now is convincing governors, senators, and powers and principalities to pass laws that are stripping us of all of those things I just mentioned, stripping us of our cognitive sovereignty, stripping us of our educational sovereignty, stripping us of any attention to the educational debt that is historically unique to us, stripping us of all of that. So we have a right to fight it back.
Yeah.
Look, you pulling your ears. So there's a point so good. He's pulling his ears. He's pulling
no,
it,
you know what I was thinking? I mean, exactly what you said. Like, you know, pulling this together. I know we, you know, you pulled this together a while back to start like this, you know, this material, right? Like these resources, you know, and some of the ideas that you just laid out, like people should pitch it together. Like, remember they had that Gary convention back in the, you know, back in the day, the 70s. Like, we need something like that again for the educational, you know, angle, which obviously intersects with so many other things. So we need another Gary convention, man, and this time like that we stick with it. You know,
we're gonna make it happen.
Yeah,
I commit right now. Ed Post is going to make it happen. We are going to make happen a positive, productive, conspiratorial meeting of Black people who are properly positioned to help us think through how we make this plain for our people and have a blueprint for our own educational salvation.
Yeah.
All right, folks, you heard it here. I put myself out there. Accountability,
collective work, responsibility, and accountability. Let's make it happen. And you're not alone. You're not alone. We, you know, you got a whole, you know, army of folks who will stand with you and help with organizing and not just attending, but helping to organize and do the work. Just both behind the scenes as well as, you know, in front. So
I appreciate that, brother. It's always nice to know that you're not alone in this world. This has been another episode of Freedom Friday, and you are still not free, but hopefully you are freer now than you were when we started this hour together. We will see you next week with another episode. Freedom Friday is back, and we are ready to attack.
I like it.